So we know on a computer or in the cloud.
On the computer, obviously. Okay, so we
Okay.
are recording.
Okay, so welcome, folks. This is a Genie seminar, and these are the rules for the Genie seminar. I'm going to be the group leader or facilitator in the seminar. I'm going to introduce the topic, and these are the rules. If you want to speak, you can just simply raise your hand, and you'll be called upon, and allow that person to speak. Try to make your comments in the area of 2 minutes or so, and to get whatever your point is. We don't, in a Genie seminar, we don't want people to talk for a half an hour or 20, 25 minutes, but express what it is your point is and how the idea might relate to you. But then you can come back again as many times as you like, 5 times, 10 times, just so we don't want to have a run-on kind of a talk by any one person. So as the facilitator, which could be you in the future, you may want to have an idea that you feel is worthwhile sharing with people, and you would want to express it and say this is something that's important and why I think others would like and others could relate to that. Or otherwise we'll have some planned topics that we've identified as being of universal interest, of general interest. So if you want to speak, simply raise your hand where we can see you. It means that Basu will have to somehow get into the picture to raise his hand if he wants to say something. There we see his hand, so we know everybody has 2 hands, so you can raise your hand and you will be called on. And then if you speak for 2 minutes, I mean, if you really have something, you can go over a little of that. Nobody's going to be a guard or whatever, but the part of the job of the facilitator will be to let you know if you are going along too long. The other is we'd like you to speak about your own experience as it relates to this. We're not interested in having a cross-talk or cross-discussion about it, with other people's point of view, but we accept everybody's point of view, and if you want to relate to it and express what your feeling is, but we're not looking to show somebody's wrong or whatever, if you get the idea. And it's a simple thing. It's that easy. Come in and speak as many times as you like. And I will start and the topic today is what I'm going to call a wake-up call. So my topic today is are we awake about what's going on in the world? And my concern of this topic is, are we in a position now where we're doing something to solve one of the most important puzzles? How can we create world peace? That's something that seems to be a universal topic. But there are a lot of people who say that most of the people in this world are asleep. And they're asleep in the sense that we have signals, what has been described as warning signals. Jack Canfield in his Success Principles books calls them yellow alerts. We're continually getting these evidences that there's something going on that's going to happen in the future. And they're telling us we ought to give them attention, but sometimes we don't give them attention. We ignore them. The topic of how to create world peace is a topic that many people who are knowledgeable say has been completely ignored, that we really are asleep to the issue of the dangers that our world is in. We all seem to have an interest in world peace. We wish or pray for world peace. As a matter of fact, the educational community has done a study where they've interviewed over 200 people and asked them if they wish or pray for world peace, and virtually every one of them said they do. Most said they wish for world peace, and numbers said they pray for world peace, and some said they both wish and pray for world peace. But no one really said they're against world peace. And if over 200 people feel that way, it kind of suggests this must be a pretty wide idea that people have. But the people who are knowledgeable say that in spite of that, people don't do anything about it. As a matter of fact, in the survey, when people were asked what they do to create world peace after they wish or pray for it, most said they don't do anything. Most people said they think that one person can't make any difference, that it's a kind of what has been called in psychology the helpless, hopeless response. If you don't think you can do anything, then you don't do anything. When I was a kid, I had hoped I admired birds flying. And I said, boy, wouldn't it be wonderful if I could flap my arms like the birds flap their wings and I could fly. And I said, maybe I'll try that. And of course, it didn't work. It didn't get off the ground. And so I stopped. It didn't take me long. And that was a helpless, hopeless response. I said, well, I don't think it can be done. So I didn't try anymore. And I haven't tried for a long time. But you see, if I saw one person flying across the sky, flapping their arms, it would give me a whole new sense of hope. I wouldn't have to see a whole flock of people flying or flapping their arms. All it would take would be one person, and it would make a big difference. But most people felt that it's a helpless, hopeless situation. But the other thing they said was that if I had an opportunity, if I knew something that made sense, you see, then I would try. So here we have a situation where most people are saying, I wish to pray for world peace, but I don't do anything. But if only someone would give me an idea, I would try to do that. But let's take a look at what some of these warning signs are. I'm going to just identify some of them. Maybe you can add some of them and see if we can identify, are we really asleep? Most people don't think they're asleep, but let's see if maybe we'll find out we are. You know, there's the Manhattan Project was the group that developed the atomic bomb, and most of those scientists after that event, and another group of people formed to create a group called the Bulletin of the Nuclear Scientists. And they created what they called a symbol of the danger the world is in. They call it the Doomsday Clock. And they said, where should we put the hands to identify symbolically how close we are to doomsday, to the use of nuclear weapons? And they initially put the clock at something like about 15 minutes to midnight. But over a period of time, as things have gotten worse, now they have moved the clock up to 3 minutes to midnight to signify that we're very close to a nuclear holocaust. Now, there have been all kinds of signs that we don't seem to pay much attention to. For example, we know that North Korea is saying that the United States is their enemy, and that they may want to attack us. They're even testing submarines. They've developed nuclear weapons now. They're testing how they can use them long distance, and they're testing them on a submarine now. And we know that submarines off our shore can start a war and end it in about 10 minutes. And we know that other countries have these weapons, and they have the same kind of capability. We know there are about 60 or 70 wars going on around the world at any one time. We know that our history from time immemorial is a history of a series of wars. If you go to the history books, you find that our history is described by a series of wars. And we know that we've seen the conflict now, even in our elections here, that people seem to be antagonistic to one another and seem to be prepared to attack one another, at least verbally right now. But on the other hand, we know that Einstein told us that when he realized the power of his special formula, E equals mc squared, he said, this has the ability to release the energy of the sun. And he told everybody, he said, it's only will be a matter of time before people will create weapons that are so destructive that there's no opportunity for a second chance. The tribes will develop these weapons, and we will soon be drifting, I think the way he put it, we will be drifting towards human catastrophe. A catastrophe unlike anything we've ever heard before or seen before. So we're not at all prepared for it. And we see what's happening in the conflict with countries building up their weapons, their nuclear arsenals. We know that we've had an incident like the Cuban Missile Crisis, where a submarine sent by Russia, one of 4 submarines sent by Russia off the shores of Cuba, loaded with a nuclear weapon, and that Russia was bringing nuclear weapons to Cuba. Yep. And of course, Kennedy said he wouldn't tolerate this, and there was a confrontation. He said, you have to remove your weapons, or else I'll take some action. And one of the submarines was submerged and was unable to surface at the time, I believe, and they lost communications. And the commander of that submarine thought that Russia had declared war, and he actually asked that his nuclear torpedo be released, which would wipe out a good bit of the American naval fleet, which was circled around the island of Cuba. And certainly that would have started the next world war. We've been that close, you see. It was only by one individual in that crew who refused to follow his order, and he arranged to get the crew to mutiny. So they never released that torpedo, but you see how close we were. And there have been other incidents where we've been close, where the bombs have been loaded in airplanes and we're within 2 minutes to someone pushing the button. We know that some people some tribes have already said that it's their religious and moral right when they get these weapons to use them. You know, we heard that from who was it that
Osama bin Laden?
No, who was it that Obama said he finally killed? Not Obama, but who was it? Went into was it Pakistan?
Yeah, Osama bin Laden.
Osama bin Laden. Yeah. So I mean, this was just one example of an individual who had said that it was their moral and religious right to use these weapons, and now we're finding that if you look at what's happening in the world, there are people who are relatively economically situated, usually have a small number of children, and people who are usually of the most impoverished category, and most of the fundamentalist religious groups usually have large numbers of children. And a lot of these groups we see are teaching people from the time they're born that it's appropriate to kill other people. For example, during World War II, we were teaching people, the Japanese were teaching their pilots to become suicide bombers. It's you commit suicide for your greater cause. We're seeing this in the ISIS movement, where we're teaching children and women and men to become suicide bombers by indoctrinating them from the time they're born or very early. And we're seeing that especially when you have large groups of children and a more impoverished category, because our history of wars has usually been between the haves and the have-nots. So there are lots of these so-called signals going on, but the point is we're not really listening to them. So the question is, what are your thoughts about waking up? What do you do about, do you ever wish or pray for world peace? Are you one of the people that are asleep? Do you think there are other people asleep? Can you relate to this at all? Or is this something that you think that there's many of the people on this quiz that where we asked a couple hundred people, do you do anything? And most people said they do nothing. Do you ever wish or pray for world peace? Do you have any interest in world peace? So that's my presentation. And now we have some time to hear what your thoughts are. So,
if I can start first.
Yes.
So one of the things that I really relate to is that as an instinct, as we are all human beings, and we generally think that nothing wrong will happen, and that is where the first step is. We all think that if we just earn money, and then we'll have happiness in life, and nothing wrong will ever happen to us until we find that somebody close to us felt something wrong happened to them, and then we started realizing there is something like this that can happen to you, and then being myopic as we are, we try to mitigate that particular problem so it doesn't come to us. I'm giving an example. So I was young, and I around 15, 16, I came to know my uncle had cancer. So I went to meet him. He was a really handsome man. I had met him 5 years ago, and when I saw him having cancer, he was like charcoal,
Mm-hmm.
and then he could not even breathe properly, but he was in very, very bad shape. So when I found out how he had cancer, he used to smoke a lot, and he had seen that. So, okay, I said, okay, I won't smoke. So giving from that example, what I think is all of us think that nothing wrong will happen to us. And all the leaders who are leading different organizations and countries in the world are also human beings at the end of the day. So they think of problems in their own myopic way, starting with America and all other big forces, where they say, okay, if we have the way I have to save America, instead of thinking about what will happen to the world, their first job is to just think about their country, and going back to your tribal thinking ways. So unless and until we can find a way to bring, and one of the things that really happened after the Second World War, the countries came together and created this United Nations organization. But then after a few years, because of selfish interest of all these different countries who wanted to take advantage of the situation, they made it just as a a paper stick organization, not more than that. It became really irrelevant at a later stage. So unless and until all of us start some kind of a movement where people think more than themselves, and then we can educate people into understanding that while you can take care of mitigate smaller problems which happen around your world, but unless and until we come together and think about how to save the world completely, we can make it more important for everybody to realize that nothing will happen. So we have to find out a way where we can have a large number of group of people come together and realize. But I have no ideas how that will happen.
Yeah.
I think something that was just said that I resonated with a lot is talking about culture, and at the end of the day, what our priorities are. Because I think one of the biggest struggles, if world peace can be achieved through bringing these communities together, and seeing that value, I think that a lot of the media that we see and we interact with kind of tells a different story about success. And we're recording right after the U.S. election, where I think a lot of people admired and elected a president in America who was seen as very successful in a way that was about power and money, and that's very attractive because I think we get sent those messages, and I think that is success in a lot of ways, but I'm not sure if that's the type of success that might bring us together to a place of world peace. So I think that moving forward, that might be something to think a lot about, is how can we either change that message, or while changing a whole message is hard, how do we turn that message into showing a different type of success?
Yes, absolutely. So, just to add to what you were saying, so unless and until I think both of us have one thing in common. Why did America elect the president it wanted to? Because again, all of us have this skewed definition of success. Somebody who has money. Until and unless we change it, and then even having money will not save anything. So at the end of the day, you can have personal success, but if you don't have a world to live in, because there are other interests out there who are ready to, as Don you said, who are ready to blow up the entire world because it seems they have this right given to them directly from God to use whatever weapons they have at their disposal. And it is a matter of just one person from that entire organization to get their hands on one of these weapons. And then you have, it will be completely go out of control. Suddenly your doomsday clock will be from 3 minutes to 30 seconds, So again, we have to, while individuals can do something at their own, at their own small way, we have to find out a way to have all these so-called successful people who are successful because they have earned a lot of money and fame, to stop for a moment and come out of their cocoon of their own success and realize that there is more to this world. And unless and until they do their part, because normal average human beings like middle class people like us, we have all of these struggles in our day, and we can do only so much. We can spend say half an hour to 1 hour every day and do certain things which are at our own disposal, but we cannot do more things like people like Jack Canfield and other big people who can do much more. They can bring more people to this fold, and that is why we need to find a way to reach out to them and shake their heads. Maybe Basu can add something to it.
Hello.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I agree with what Sharath has said. In fact, the same thing happened in Britain also with Brexit. So it's again showing some of the tribal characteristics which Don keeps referring to, and sometimes people are as a mass, like it's not like one or two people are voting in a particular way. It's a huge percentage of the population which is choosing something which is irrational or illogical. Like somebody who will be normally well educated and who understands economics or understand general market, etc., would believe that people should not do this particular way of action. Say, let's take that example of Brexit. Logically, they should not have done that, and after that, the pound has also fallen significantly, and their economy is in trouble actually, and many banks are exiting, etc. And there will be loss of jobs. So people are not understanding that they are sometimes taking decisions together, which is leading to a greater trouble. So it's not only terrorism, etc., where a group of people keep taking a wrong decision, but it's also even in the Western world, both UK, US, they have shot themselves in the foot, and it's because of the tribal thinking.
I think Jacob was saying something. He raised his hand.
Yeah. Anybody can raise their hand and pretty much go speaking. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, I wanted to kind of bounce off of what both of you had said, that trying to figure out what can we do. And talking about Jack, I think a reason that I know it seems like Jack has made a big impression on Don, and I think all of us too, is that Jack seems to lead by seems to be pretty modest in his started out just sharing other people's stories, and then kind of built a bit of an identity off of that, and seems to lead by example, and that seems to thinking about what we can do in our daily lives, that seems to be a place to start, because like you said, Cher, we might not have the reach that a Jack Canfield has, but we still come into contact with tens, hundreds of people every day, depending on what kind of community that we're in. That if we can, a positive step, if we can kind of live in that example of being peaceful and kind of showing what that mentality and what that what building a life like that means, and showing it positively, seems to be a good first step in creating a culture in the small area that you live that might be able to spread.
Yeah. So Jacob, what you're saying is right. See, that is all of us who know Don are already doing it in a small way as we can. The thing is, when as per what Don said, when the Doomsday Clock is set at 3 minutes to 12, then a big bang is required. Then the only way we can make the right hand go lower is a big bang, and that is where we are missing, because as Basu said, it is not just individuals. We can always claim that terrorists are bad, but what about people in the modern world who choose people with tribal thinking as their leaders, who have already denounced climate change, who have already denounced that a particular section or a particular community is to be banished from this entire country. So there is this, unless and until individuals and human beings start thinking more than their own job, I think and many of the Democrats have already accepted, especially who was the other guy? I forgot his name. Who was the second to Hillary Clinton? I forgot his name.
Tim Kaine.
No. This time in the Democratic race, he was the other guy, right? 70-year-old person. I forgot his name.
Oh,
Bernie Sanders. Yeah, Bernie Sanders accepted recently in an interview that the Democratic Party moved away from the middle class, the working class. And that is why the working class sort of took revenge from the Democratic Party, and then they voted in mass for Donald Trump, and that is the reason that he thinks that Donald Trump won. That is how he thinks that Donald Trump won. But if you think from a global point of view, not from an American point of view, the Republican Party together and with Donald Trump as the person leading the party now as the president of the United States, they have denounced certain very, very important phenomenon which can create an annihilation of the entire world. Like Donald Trump has shown his instincts to go behind the terrorists with all the power that he needs, and then that can only create more problems in future, because that is not a good solution to have. And the Republican Party is denouncing climate change, which as per recent research is the second biggest problem for the entire earth, as we say, after this nuclear threat. So this is the second biggest threat that we have after nuclear threat. So unless and until, I'm not sure, we individuals can do their part. They can learn some of these skills and pass it on to 10 people. But sometimes, as what happened in India, the very good example is the corruption was creeping in India from 1947 to 57, 67, and then it became a norm rather than exception. Recently, one of an economist in India, he wrote an article and he said, not a single person in India is honest. And if we all look at it, it is actually true. Those who are honest did not get an opportunity to cheat. And that is absolutely true. As far as that article made me reflect. Yes, it is true. And it is not that we want to be dishonest, because from day one, when we were born, we never got an opportunity to do these things honestly. So, and that is why the Prime Minister thought, and Don and I had a discussion about this last week, that there is a big bang needed sometimes, and it creates a lot of problem. It creates a lot of churning, as we say, of the society. So we need to have a big bang, and then follow up before and after the big bang. All the other things can come. While we do individual stuff as we do, and post the big bang, we continue to do those small individual contributions, but that big bang is something which is missing. My only worry is that big bang should be a positive big bang and not a nuclear. That would be really terrible. Like, you have one big bang of that kind, and then several people get hurt, and then suddenly we scramble together and say, oh my God, we have to do something about it. It should not be too late for that big bang to occur.
So the reality of a nuclear holocaust is there is no second chance. Most people are saying we've always learned by mistakes.
Yep.
But in today's world, this is what Einstein, I think, was saying, that we now have a weapon that people are going to use that is different than anything that has happened in the past, where we can't afford to have another mistake, because it'll be the end of things. If we release the nuclear arsenal, somebody pushes one button and a rocket goes in the air and gives a signal to release all the others on ready release status. That will be the end of civilization. That's the concern. And now an example that Jack uses is that many people kind of conduct their kind of life where they're not very concerned about what they eat and the kind of lifestyle they have, but all of a sudden when they have a heart attack, people then all of a sudden say, oh, I've got to change things. I've got to do something. So we don't do very much about prevention until we have an incident.
Yep.
And that may be our nature. So is this a way, again, I'm trying as a moderator now, bringing it back to the idea. What about this helpless, hopeless idea? Is it appropriate to say that we have to change other people? Or is there something about ourselves? Are we saying the answer is simply we have to get other people to do something different. There's a cartoon that I remember seeing in the library where they have the desk and so on, and one of the desks, one of the things said self-help books, and in the cartoon somebody came up and said, I'm not looking for a self-help book, I want to find the books that get other people to change. So, I mean, it may be that we need to come back somehow to what do? Are we taking a position that it's the other person's responsibility? And is there something that comes back to us? Are we acting in a helpless way, or what are we doing? If you believe these yellow alerts or these things that are going on, what's the next step? Is it to blame other people? I mean, it may help to identify with others, but is it something that we can do, or indeed is it accurate to say that most people are asleep and do take the position that many of the people said in these interviews, these 200 interviews, that I really believe there's nothing that I as an individual can do. So therefore, I don't do anything. Yeah, take it.
I think it kind of brings it back to what I was, trying to circle around before. But I think a third question or fourth question might be, what do you want to do? And I would imagine that though most people feel an impulse because it's a good thing to do. I think people have a lot of impulse to do a lot of good things, to donate more money to charity and to be better to their family. And, these are all things that I think people recognize as important, but, I don't think, we don't have the drive to do it in the same way that we want to, to seem attractive or to make money. So it would seem like rather than, looking at that question a little bit deeper and trying to figure out, why, if people want to do this one thing, and I think there are some tools, they would have the capacity if they really believe it's this important, but why do people feel not drawn to do it? And what in our culture, does that? Because it seems to be universal. It's not just in America where we're recording from, or India where we're recording from, but all over the world. So I think I agree about, thinking about ourselves first, but maybe exploring why, if maybe we don't have the perfect answer, but we do have many answers, why we think this is so important that we don't feel drawn to do it, why it's not appealing for us to do it as a culture.
Because we are helpless, hopeless, as Don said. All of us have our own vested interests, and as long as I can get my morning coffee, go to my work, and my boss doesn't hate me, or maybe my boss hates me and I don't care, I get my salary at the end of the day, I'm happy and nothing wrong will happen to me. But then suddenly one day, something wrong happens, and with my myopic, approach to life, I say, okay, this happened to me, I'll not let this happen to me again, and I try to, mitigate that. So either somebody has to, I don't know, this is where I really get stuck. No matter how many times I think, okay, the drive, and that is a very important thing that Jacob brought it. So the drive is missing. The only thing that I can do is somehow to make myself do things, and that is the reason all of us are coming every week here. That is something that is, Sunday morning it is like 37 degrees outside. I don't want to come out of the house, but that is bringing me here. So that is there, but I don't know how this will, and I hope it will someday, how this will make one day, Kim Jong-un, whatever his name is, to say, okay, Sharath is waking up in the morning, so I'll not blow up the world. Or maybe Donald Trump to suddenly realize that, or accept, that climate change is a major thing, and so the polar caps are melting at such a fast rate that pretty soon you'll have entire Europe freezing. So when Republicans are asked what is happening, they say, don't you see it is too cold today? There is no climate change at all. There is no global warming. It is very cold today. So that kind of answers come out. So politicians, us all together who inhabit this world, are all myopic. There are very few come once in a while who are, who think beyond themselves, and those people are the people who change the world, so to say, like Martin Luther King or Gandhi or all these people. And maybe we have one person sitting here, but nobody listens to him as much as he wants them to. So maybe Don can show us the way for now. How do you think? What should people do? To do, number one, is change their own way of thinking. Start from being myopic and think more than themselves. And suddenly, how do they influence others to think or do more than that? And that is the more difficult part. And how do you think that this will create that big bang? Where you think that the real people who hold the power in this world will come together and understand, yes, okay, we have to change the way we think.
Well, you know how psychiatrists usually answer questions?
By asking questions?
By asking a question. So, do you think it's, how do you wake yourself up? Do you agree with the original comment of this trend was that, are we really asleep? Are you asleep? Do you need to be woken up, or is it possible for you to wake up? Or maybe you don't think you're asleep. We're getting all kinds of warning signals. This trend has to do with, we have lots of warning signals. And why is it that we don't do anything about it? Or why is it that you don't do anything about it? Is it because, is it hopeless? I mean, do you agree with what other people basically come to, that I won't think about it, I won't bother about it because it's, there's nothing I can do about it. It's up to our president, it's up to God. I mean, these are the kind of comments that people make. It's up to getting other people to do something. We've got to get other people to do something. Is that the answer? Or maybe that's why we're stuck. Should we conclude we're hopeless, helpless, and forget about it and just hope for the best and pray that maybe either God or our president or something will happen that will change everything?
One more thing is that we think nothing will happen to me. I think I'm sitting here in Connecticut. Basu and Rini are sitting there in Mumbai. Okay, they're far away from the city, like main Mumbai city. So nothing wrong will happen to us. So even if there is a nuclear holocaust, everything will happen in Middle East. Nothing will happen here. So,
but based on what's just been said, that if there's a nuclear holocaust, it's going to wipe out civilization as we know it. And is that an acceptable conclusion? I mean, I guess as long as you feel it doesn't apply to you, is that the conclusion? It really doesn't apply to me because I'm really not going to be involved. It's just those guys over there,
Yes.
They'll kill a few people in some other country, and where ISIS is killing people and so on, but nobody's going to come here to keep me from having my breakfast in the morning or taking care of my kids. I'll take care of, my job is taking care of my kids and seeing that we have enough food on the table, and all this other issue is somebody else will deal with it.
Yep.
What is it going to? What will it take to wake me up? I say to me, what is it that wakes me up? Is there something that would wake you up? Is this information, knowledge? Does knowledge help? If you agree that the things that were said, that people are plotting to kill us right now. There are people somewhere that we don't know, we've never seen before, we haven't done anything as far as we know to injure them or hurt them, but yet there seems to be some reasonable evidence that people somewhere around the other side of the world want to kill us.
Absolutely.
And
yes.
they're even interested in killing themselves. That's the really strange thing. These people say that it's okay to kill themselves, to kill us. I mean, is this an accurate statement? And if we think it is, Do we forget about it? Is it just say, maybe that's the conclusion, just, and then some people indeed are saying this, don't save any money for your retirement program anymore. We only have 10 years to live, so take out your retirement program. Don't put any more in, and just enjoy yourself right now. Have a splurge. While you can, whatever money you have, take your trip around the world or whatever. Go.
Just avoid the Middle East in the way. Go around that.
But it's something to think about here.
Jacob wants to say something.
Well, I mean, I think that's the problem. I'm not sure if anybody that I come into contact with is thinking like that or saying that. Because that seems to be the first hurdle. Is I would imagine if you talk to most people on the street about what the biggest threats are in the world, you might have 1 out of 100 who would talk about a nuclear threat, because there's very few of us who are alive who lived through the horror of the last nuclear threat, or the last major nuclear use. And then there's fewer of us, but especially not thinking about the new generation, the generation that's on television, who are commentators and pundits, who remember the Cuban Missile Crisis.
Yep.
And, I think, I don't know if there are other relevant, maybe if you're in Korea or Japan, you might be more sensitive to North Korea. I know certainly when I was living in India, there was always the idea that, that the conflict with Pakistan was significant and that both nations had nuclear weapons, but certainly wasn't anything that, I don't remember ever seeing that conversation on the news talking about border conflicts, but never thinking about the nuclear threat. That I think a first issue is, I think people don't understand, the significance. So I think education is one, but two, we know about things like hunger around the world, and many of us don't donate to food charities, or in America, I think almost half of the food that we purchase, bring into our house, leaves as garbage. We know about climate change, and most of us don't change the culture in our houses or live vegetarian, which would make a big significance about the way that the climate works, or change the way we get around.
Yep.
So I think you have two problems. One is the education, and the second is the culture, because I think people aren't going to care about it until they realize the significance. But I think there are many things that we realize that are as significant as the nuclear threat, but we just choose not to do anything about because it's painful to think about, and we don't see it as much of a priority. So I think there might be two questions there that we'll have to answer. How do we educate? But then two, I think there's a lot of things that people are very well educated about that are very horrible in this world. And it's more of a cultural question to why, to make those things a priority.
Yes, and Jacob, you have actually hit the nail on its head. Change for anyone is very important, very difficult, and people are set to live in the way that they have been living for a long time. And for any normal human being, even an educated human being, suddenly sit up and say, okay, I will do something different from tomorrow, so that the world is, as you said, for a person eating non-vegetarian food, if he comes to know, for example, I think I talked about it last time, the 80% of the land in America that is used, of the total land in America that is used to cultivate food, is used for growing cattle, which is beef.
Mm-hmm.
And the beef is the single biggest problem which creates, or the biggest creator of methane gas in the environment. Now, when the cows chew the food, they release methane gas, and methane is 20 times more. What is it called? It absorbs 20 times more. Than carbon dioxide. It's 20 times more greenhouse than carbon dioxide. So basically, just by avoiding beef, Okay, American can contribute the most. Similarly, in India, the festivals like the Bakrid festival or the Eid festival that they have, where they kill thousands and thousands, sometimes that hundreds of thousands of cattle on the road in their houses, those kinds of things. But if you tell somebody like, for example, Basu, to say no, from today I will not eat non-vegetarian food, it will be very difficult. And for me, since I have never eaten, I can just claim that, oh, it's very easy for me. But if I had eaten non-vegetarian food for my entire life, it would be difficult for me to do that, make that individual sacrifice. And we are not doing it because we think.
We don't believe in your data. We are not sure. I think non-veg is good for the
no, okay, we'll have that conversation separately. But this is actually there is a new documentary by Leonardo DiCaprio, and it is called Before the Flood. I suggest all of you see it. It is an eye opener on how climate change is going to come faster than what you think. Some of us think it is 100 years away, but it is actually much closer, 30 years or maybe even less. And unless and until what happened in the Paris agreement, it is every country contributes to it. Last time they said the ice caps in Greenland were down by almost 2 centimeters or 2-3 centimeters. That is so much water going into, or ice going into water, you cannot imagine. And that is why you see such big different weather conditions that are coming here, like big storms and all those things. And I think what Jacob was saying was right. So because there has not been, and which is actually a good thing to have, there has not been such a big nuclear calamity or nuclear problem which has come to the forefront on news in the recent past. That is why we are not appraised to it. We think, okay, it is a thing of the past. But having said that, more countries are having nuclear weapons. The nuclear weapons are much more powerful than what were used in the Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And more countries have it in ready-to-go status. But it's just that it has not come to the forefront for maybe past 20 years at least. And that is why we think it has. Most of us, we don't take it as seriously as we should.
Einstein told us not that we are creating weapons. We can create weapons now that will destroy us, but he did tell us that a solution. He said the only way we can change, we have to teach ourselves a new way of thinking. But his comment that many of you probably heard is that insanity is thinking the same way that caused the problem and expecting a different outcome.
Yep.
Thinking the same way. Essentially saying that we have to point the finger at ourselves and say it may be that we are in a situation where we're thinking that if we keep doing what we did in the past, that is, we solve differences by creating bigger weapons, stronger weapons, and we get our way by essentially dominating the weaker group. The stronger group dominates the weaker group. Now, just my wife and I went to a movie yesterday, the new J.K. Rowling movie about the beast. And they talk about a danger to the universe, to the world, basically, an evil force that was so powerful that it was doing destruction. And we've seen most of our other movies, in other words, our entertainment talks about wars that are coming up that are usually fought with aliens and so on, and they're fighting with weapons, unusual weapons.
Yes.
And we see them with special kinds of guns and so on. They kill a few people and some people die and so on. But you notice we haven't seen any movie that talks about a war, a nuclear war that starts and ends in 10 minutes. Where most people are saying the reality today is that the kind of war today will be someone will push a button. It will be within 10 minutes that these weapons will strike, especially if they were released by a submarine off our shores that is capable of wiping out most of our cities, that the war would begin and be over in 10 minutes. And there would be no second chance. we haven't seen anything in our entertainment. I haven't seen anything that depicts that wakes us up and helps us to realize we're not talking about the Star Wars anymore. You know, we're not talking about the good guys and the bad guys. We're talking about a situation where virtually everybody thinks they're good guys. Everybody thinks they have the right to have their tribe or their group be the winners. And we're in a situation now, and the question is, are we awake to that? You know, so the strand for today is suggesting that there's a lot of people who say we are asleep. We're getting all kinds of signals, but we as individuals are not doing, we're not asking ourselves, what is the way that we can do something? Even in this discussion, my observation, we're really talking about what other people ought to do. Coming to that library and saying, I want the book that gets other people to change.
Yep.
And not asking the question which pertains to me. What is my role? Do I have any role? Is it, maybe it is hopeless, helpless. I think I will just take the position that there's nothing, it's already too late. There's nothing I can do about it. And when people say that we are in a helpless, hopeless state, I will stay asleep. I'd rather continue to have a nice dream and enjoy that dream if there's nothing by waking up I can do anyway. So that's, you know, basically what I would say the strand is, are we asleep? And it's up to each individual to decide, is there something we can do? I think we've had a very good discussion myself. I think we've shared some very valid points. One thing I just will comment about, part of the purpose of this meeting was to get a little bit of an experience in a Genie group, what it's like. And just my observations is that for the most part, we did a good job. We did a good job. Often there are silences. You know, I mean, people think there's no reason everybody has to be talking all the time. Sometimes the most productive time in a meeting is when people think, and then after thinking for a bit, then they raise their hand and say what they have to say. So that's part of a function of a Genie group. Genie group doesn't mean that everybody will speak. You know, Rainey didn't say much about her thoughts today, which is fine. You know, maybe she's just more of a thinker, a contemplative person, and she will think harder than anybody else, even though she didn't say anything and come up with something even more important at another time. But in a Genie group, it's not uncommon that there are periods of silence. Silence can be very productive. And again, it's appropriate that people do raise their hand and speak. We did a lot more speaking across to people rather than speaking about ourselves today. So in a good Genie group, a lot of the emphasis would be a little more on my feelings and so on. At times, we all tend to get rather enthusiastic, which is fine, and we go over our 2 minutes.
Yep.
Which is, again, we learn from that, you know. So I'm just making these observations about how a Genie group progresses. And if we have 6 or 8 or 10 of these meetings, people will begin to get more in tune with the basic rules. You know, it's likely that when you first start something, you don't follow all the rules. You make a lot of mistakes, honestly, until eventually we get to the point where we relate these things to ourselves. But that's basically, I think our time is out now. It's about, we've spent close to an hour. I would say the usual length of time could be a Genie group of about an hour. Could be an hour and a half. I personally think an hour and a half is a better time period. I've been in meetings that have gone for 36 hours.
Oh my God.
You know, sometimes when people really get intensely involved with one another and each person really has a chance to share what they're about, share something of themselves. And when they're a little tired and their reluctance to speak and so on is a little bit worn down, that much more gets accomplished, you know, over an intense period of time. We realize that if we're going to change something the way we've been thinking for 20 or 30 years, whatever age we are, it doesn't happen in a few minutes or in one meeting. It occurs over many times. It's realistic to think that if indeed we're going to change the way people think, it's not going to happen. As a friend of mine who was in charge of the substance abuse program when Nixon was was president. Goes back that far. He used an example. He said, "You don't turn a battleship around and like you turn a rowboat around. It takes a big space and a lot of time to get a battleship to turn it around." And
Yes.
that was maybe the thing today. But so we don't change. I think we've been thinking this way for over 1 billion years, going back to the way animals and our animal brain thinks, and realize that our human brain is only like a blink of an eye compared to the length of time of, we've been around as life for 3.5 billion years, and our animal brain, starting with animals back probably up before the dinosaurs over 1 billion years ago, was processing information in 2 categories: our way or the other way, the right way, the wrong way. And now we're just in the last period of time come to a new way of possibility of thinking, that we use different ways of thinking. So let's continue now for the next sessions we have. Is agreeable, we'll have a time when we'll do this format, and I'll come up with about 15 or 20 strands or success principles. Maybe I can even get other people to come up with some. Maybe you could come up with one. Maybe that's something to think about. What is one of the most important success principles in your own life? If you had something that you felt works as a universal principle that you think would be good for other people to share, instead of saying, how do I get other people to change? Instead saying, what is it that I have to offer?
Yep.
What is it that I have that I would like to share with other people? You see how it leads in, then somewhere along the line you'd say, I'd like to be the facilitator or the leader of the next Genie group. And I have an idea that I'd like to share. And maybe I'd like to, even before the meeting, suggest something that people could read, or an idea, or somebody who was inspiring to me. It might not even have been my idea. It's just something I got from somebody else. But you see, as we go along, we then develop a way of lifelong education. The idea of Genie groups that, we started with AA, where you might go once a week, or you go as when you really feel you need it. When you're upset, if you have a place where you can get support from other people and share some ideas. Wouldn't that be nice if we had a world like that, where wherever you were, if you were on a vacation, you were on a cruise ship, you said, gee, if there are a group that I really had some really disturbing news, or, I'm really depressed today, I really need some help. If there was some place where you go that you knew you could get it. If we had Genie groups like that all over the world, like AA groups are held. So you can begin to see, I hope, the potential for something that we'll try to engage with. This was a first experiment. I think everybody did very good. Congratulations to us. We have a good example of a Genie group, and we'll look to get together next Sunday. So
okay, thanks. Yeah, that was good. I think we can replicate this with other people, and we can check the recording, how that recording has worked out.
Yeah, it would be a good idea if you take this